Good morning, everybody. What's going on? Bringing you another edition of the new edition of the latest edition of the podcast. So here we go. We're going. Train's leaving the station. Hop on. We got a lot of planes flying around Tucson. A lot of jets, a lot of planes. Air traffic control, staying busy. It's weird to do this and not get personal. I would say it's still just weird to do this, generally speaking. Still, every time I think I'm getting used to it, then I realize I'm not as used to it as I thought. Does that make me sound like I'm being a baby? Does that make me sound like I'm being a bitch? Am I being a bitch? Are you going to turn the channel now? Are you going to go listen to Joe Schmogan because I'm being complainy? Later, dog. Yeah, this podcast, though, this one is going to be on the old Elon Musk. You guys ever heard of this guy? Elon Musk. Imagine if you would have gone to school with that guy. I wonder what he was like when he was young. Actually, no, I don't really care. I do care what he's like now. And after doing the cybernetics podcast, or I'm sorry, the podcast on the net, where they kind of touch on cybernetics, it got me way more interested in the philosophy of these guys. And as I was trying to figure out what to do the next podcast on, I just kept getting, how do I come up with topics? Well, first of all, I just kind of put out the feels. And that's the best thing about the podcast, is just being able to feel your way through it. And as I was taking the week to figure out what I wanted to do the podcast on, I realized, dang, I've got these Elon Musk videos queued up. And what he was talking about, like, it's just been interesting for me as I sink back into the biblical worldview, as I allow my mind to be renewed each day and my reasoning be sharpened and, filtered through a biblical worldview. Things are sounding crazier and crazier to me that other people are saying. Mostly that these people that don't believe in God at all are saying. And it's crazy to me because I feel like when I was younger, I used to feel bad for people who didn't believe in God. Like, I used to feel bad. I didn't feel like I was like, so much smarter than them or something like that. I just felt like, because they could have been better at math than me or better at science than me. But I just felt like I could feel the emptiness in and around them growing up. And that was something that I did not want. I didn't care. It wasn't anything that I thought that, oh, wow, these guys, they got this thing that I need. I always felt it was the other way around. I was like, how come I know less than you, but I've got way more peace about what's going on here than you? And I still feel that way. More interesting, too, just getting older, because there's even comedians like, Dave Chappelle is a great example of someone who I used to think he was so wise and really looked up to him when I was early 20s, 19, 20, 21. And that, I just thought, because he was so funny, I just figured he was equally as wise. And man, it's just crazy what 2020 did, because I really there were so many musicians even that I really loved their music. And then when I saw where they were aligning politically, I was like, what? Like a couple guys that I really, really looked up to. And again, it's kind of finding out that these people don't even believe in a God or know what to, even just the concepts around God and around politics that they believed in just kind of threw me for a loop. And because these are older musicians, they're not that much older than me, even if they're just like 6 years older than me. They're still guys I've been looking up to for the last 15 years. And then to finally figure out that, I don't know, there's some softies, then I just thought, it was just so interesting to me, because it's not that I don't listen to their music anymore or anything like that. It's just, I just see them as like artists now. I used to see them as way wiser than me, and more experienced than me and all this stuff. And now I just go, man, it is a blessing to put your wisdom in the Lord, because it's God's wisdom at that point, and you can't get any better than that. So yeah, Elon Musk, another example of a guy who's just really confident about putting his faith in himself. And I get it. When you ask him a question, he's going to give you an answer that if you ask him a question about today, he's going to give you an answer that's about 30 years from now. And so we need those kinds of thinkers. But what is someone like him grounding all those thoughts into? How is he justifying all these thoughts that he's having? And as I dig deeper and deeper, it's just getting a little bit more crazy, because I'm like, how is this guy going out there so confidently with what he knows to be true? And I just go, we all have, that's what I'm saying, is we all have a right to believe in what we believe in and to believe it as true. And then what is fueling our logic and reasoning and worldview? Is it the future? Is it, for Elon, is it this idea of not ever really being able to know what the meaning of life is? Therefore, we should learn how to ask more important questions, or better frame questions better, so that the answers come up more almost immediately. Is it just to gain enlightenment over time? The meaning of life is to gain enlightenment over time. I mean, that is what happens. We do gain enlightenment over time. I don't know if that's the meaning. That's part of the process. That's part of the way it works. But I don't know if that's, well, obviously I don't think that's the entire meaning. The first part, let's get into the videos. The first video, both of the videos, I think I only watched two. One was an Elon Musk video, but it was tied into the Cristo oil, the sacred secretion. I got to do a video on that another time. But yeah, so in the first video, he's talking to, I think, is it Rainn Wilson? Is that the guy, Dwight's name from The Office? He's interviewing Elon Musk. And he asked Elon, he said, do you worship anything? He said, I don't really worship anything, but I do devote myself to the advancement of using technology. You really have to, you have to get into what is the definition of worshiping something. Because I think Elon worships technology. I don't know if he realizes it. I mean, the amount of faith that he has in the advancement of humanity using technology is above any other. I mean, it's up there with the greatest amounts of faith in technology that one could have. But all these technologies, what are the right ones? What are counterfeit technologies? Where's the line between technology becoming, it's good and then it becomes counterfeit? I guess counterfeit meaning using it for the wrong thing. So there's a huge level of control with technology that people are trying to get us to undoubtedly put our faith in. So the more we use technology and the more technology kind of dictates how we behave each day, the more control, in a sense, technology has. Now, this is just in the way of us using technology. Again, like the Will Smith, Chris Rock thing. Everyone on their phones in a matter of minutes, within 3 to 5 minutes of that happening, that was the slap heard around the world, right? I mean, it blew my mind how fast information traveled at that point to the globe. No 12-hour cycle, no 24-hour cycle, just straight boom. Within 3 to 5 minutes, covered the whole globe. And it's the same with things like Amber Alerts, right? Or flash flood warnings, or even lately with all these vehicles crashing with just hazardous chemicals and gas and stuff on it. They are sending out alerts, right, to everyone's phone as soon as it happens. And even in court, I mean, like just your phone is it's like a log for what you do. So in court, your phone can either be the evidence that sets you free or that confirms you're guilty. But this is still, we're still so far away from this huge computer machine, these supercomputers and machines that will be all over, right? The system of machines that will be AI, and it will connect what people in Germany are doing, and the AI will connect that with what people in Japan are doing, and the AI will connect that with what people in the States are doing, and there will be a technology police. Basically, there'll be enforcers, there'll be police that work for this AI system. And who knows? I mean, gosh, by the time we get to that system, maybe it will just be robots that are the police for the AI system. Yeah, maybe humans won't even be doing anything, and that'll be the worst. And I think Elon warns people about that. He definitely understands how bad things could get under AI. But in his worldview, the only options we have are we surrender to AI and save the planet, because that eventually AI will be able to tell us exactly how to live on this planet. And then we will need to be multiplanetary, because he says in about 4.5 billion years, the sun is going to evaporate all the water off the planet and we won't be able to live here. And again, I get it. I mean, I can't imagine not believing in God and just sitting around and thinking, okay, how am I going to solve the world's problems? There's no God. How am I going to solve the world's problems? There's no God. How am I going to solve the world's problems? And I'm not saying that people that believe in God aren't solving problems or shouldn't be thinking about how to solve problems. It's just where you're starting from and what is on your side cosmically is just so different when you have a personal God versus an impersonal God versus a no God. And Elon's greatest argument for there not being a God is the argument that says, okay, if there's a super consciousness out there, if there's a God out there, what created that God? And I get it too, because the only thing that makes more sense than they're always needing, let's just say, that makes as much sense as they're needing to be a God that created that God and created that God and created that God, is there being a God outside of time, space, and matter, outside of all creation, that created all these things. That's such a huge alternative. The interviewer asks him, do you pray? And he says, no, I don't pray. Not even when I had malaria and I was deathly sick. And I love the interviewer because he was like, wow, that's really not praying. And basically this idea, Elon Musk is saying, this idea of a super consciousness watching over our every movement and kind of evaluating it against some criteria and deciding whether we're going to one place or another when we die, versus the most likely explanation is that complexity evolved from simplicity and that the simple elements over time combined to make more complex, and then we arrived at what we are. And again, he asks, if there's a super consciousness, where did it come from? I don't mind the heart on some level. On one level, Elon's heart is he's out of touch, right? He's out of touch with what it means to worship something. Because again, he's worshiping technology, but he doesn't even know it. Or he's at least out loud not saying like, hey, I worship technology, science is religion, this is what I do. Part of what he talks about is like, he said he read all the religious and philosophical texts when he was younger, and they were all depressing until he read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And basically this is what he got from that, is to gain greater enlightenment over time. That seems like a good one. We don't really know what the meaning of life is, or even really what the right question to ask is. But if we can improve our understanding of the universe, then eventually we can figure out what the right question to ask is. And if it's not the meaning to life, it's something. I notice he mumbles. Elon will like kind of get a little quiet and like mumble the ends of what he's saying sometimes. And even I was like reading this, the subtitles were not exactly the same, because I think either it was some sort of like AI doing the subtitles. And so when he muddied his words, it couldn't tell. And it picked a word and was wrong. It was either AI that did that or human that did that. But I felt like I was able to actually hear what he was really saying in those moments. That's why I think it was probably AI that was doing the transcribing. But then eventually we can figure out the right question to ask. And if it's not the meaning to life, it's something. I was like, what does he? It's like, what does meaning mean? It's like love. You know, like the word meaning is it has big implications. I just go, how is that not the right question to ask? The meaning of life. And then what's so crazy is how much the biblical worldview gives us as far as an understanding of the meaning of the universe. But for him to read at a young age, I think he's at like 16 or 18 or something, all the religious texts and the philosophical texts, I'm like, okay, well, how much reading did he do? And then I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. You don't have to read tons and tons, but you're also still a young lad. And for you to, at 18, decide that meaning is pointless or that meaning is undefinable, and therefore you go, okay, well, if I can't determine the meaning of life, then I at least can determine something that I like about life, which would be, one, it would be living, and then two, it would be this advancement, this enlightenment, this excitement, and this kind of following of curiosity. But still, I go, what if the question, what's the meaning of life, isn't the question to ask, and it's something else? I can't even, that's where like he kind of trailed off when he said that. And I just go, what is he, if we got to figure out the right questions to ask. And if it's not the meaning of life, it's something. Isn't that something? Wouldn't that something ultimately fall back into the meaning of life? This is where just it doesn't make sense to me. All right, we ask a better question and we find out that evolution is the thing. That's the thing. Enlightenment is the thing. Well, then that would be the meaning of life. I don't know what this something is that isn't attached to meaning. It actually concerns me that he's so out there in his imagination that he's like, maybe love is actually not love, and maybe it's something else. Meaning is not meaning. Maybe we've assigned the wrong meaning to the word meaning, and it's actually really something else that AI is going to tell us. So then he says, the question is harder than the answer. And if you can properly phrase the question, then the answer is the easiest part. To the degree that we can better understand the universe, then the better okay, let's slow down there. The question is harder than the answer. I don't know about that, man. I don't know about that. I think I don't get it. I don't get the question being harder than the answer. There's some questions that are pretty easy to ask that the following through with the answer is way harder than asking the question. So what is he talking about? I mean, I get it. I get in especially in like problem solving situations, the question is huge. You could have a whole paradigm shift because you think you're solving one problem and then you realize actually you're solving a completely different one. So yeah, really knowing what the right question to ask is part of the battle. But there's getting the answer, and then there's following through with everything. Then we better know what questions to ask, and then whatever the question is that most approximates what's the meaning of life, that's the question we could ultimately get closer to understanding. And so I thought, well, to the degree that we can expand the scope and scale of consciousness and knowledge, that would be a good thing. New knowledge. Tell me more. To me, this seems like not very smart, to the point where I really doubt that I'm understanding what he's saying. Because I'm like, there's no way that Elon Musk is for sure way smarter than me. So how should I have any wisdom or any ability to ever look at him and say, what? What, dude? What are you talking about, bro? But that's what I feel like is happening right here. So then we better know the questions to ask. And then once we start asking the question that most approximates so the meaning of life is the question. It's not the answer. And that's what blows me away. Again, it just falls back into this mechanized religion, the religion of mechanics. It's not the answer of the meaning of life that's important. It's the questions that you ask. It's the process of asking the right questions. That will most approximate what the true meaning of life is. It's that, and then we got this dude that was around. We got historical evidence for him being around. And he is the Son of God, and God put him here on earth to die for our sins because we are a fallen species. And why are we a fallen species? Well, because in order for us to experience the fullest version of reality where we actually have a free will and we're not just cogs or we're not just little robots in the simulation, we had to have free will. God had to give us the ability. We had to have the ability to fall short, to make our own choices, to lean on our own understanding. And then literally these atheists come and go, well, that's the thing that's going to get us out of here. We don't know how we got here. Well, we literally got here by doing that. We got here by leaning on our own understanding. I just love the sheer abandonment of the idea of any type of like ontological investigation into any of, it's like the planet is 13.5 billion years old, or I'm sorry, the universe, the planet is 4.5 billion years old. I don't get the believing in how we got here where we are today, 13.5 billion years later. I'm supposed to believe that. But I'm not supposed to believe that there could be a God and then that he took human form to set us free from the chains of our human nature in the sense that we're constantly flawed. We're constantly letting each other down. We're constantly wreaking havoc on the planet. But yeah, just put more faith in us and we'll figure it out. And part of that is then figuring out something that's smarter than us so that we can put our faith in that. We already do it with a calculator. I don't know what 300 times 4.75% is. I don't know what 2 million divided by 676,000 is. I can tell you though with a calculator, but that doesn't say anything about the meaning of life. Why is it even meaningful that math is a thing? Why is it even meaningful that science is a thing? It just is. It's just simplicity continuing to multiply itself to the point of complexity. Duh. You're telling me the process of what happened. That doesn't tell me the meaning. What's the meaning of simplicity over time getting more complex? Well, the meaning of it is that we become more enlightened. What is the meaning of becoming more enlightened? It's thriving. It's so that we can take better care of each other. Why should we take better care of each other? Well, because it's better for us if we do, because we get to live longer. Why should we live longer? Because that's why we're here, is to live long, and the meaning of life is to live long. Why is the meaning of life to live long? Well, because it's best for us. Okay, who determines what's best for us? Surely there's got to be some people on this planet where it would be best for them if they weren't here. I'm sure they feel that way, and I'm sure there's a level of truth to it in some cases. So who is determining what makes life worth living? Living life is what makes life worth living? The point to living life is living life? The point to living life is asking the right questions. What's the point of asking the right questions? Well, if we ask the right questions, then maybe we'll find out the right meaning. What is meaning? Asking the right questions? I mean, I don't know. Anyways, then he talks about, basically being a multi-planetary species and how all the consciousness, all civilizations, everything we've known and done. I love, actually, it was quite poetic. He says, we're on a tiny blue dot suspended in a sunbeam. Yeah. Yeah, he's got the whole world in his hands. Just as poetic. People get trapped in squabbles amongst humans. So he's like, I just wish everyone could be as enlightened. Sorry. He's like, I just wish everyone could be as enlightened as me. Because he's sitting here, people get too trapped in the squabbles amongst humans. Yes, and you have found peace, Elon Musk. You do not squabble with anyone, I'm sure. Trapped in the squabbles amongst humans. I mean, sure. There's, again, that's a great example of sin in our lives. That's a great way to express sin manifesting, to be trapped in the squabbles amongst humans, right? We're supposed to be loving our enemy, loving other people the way we want to be treated. But I'm sure it's going to be way more simple, Elon, when we've got, humans over here in this galaxy and some on this planet and some over here. I'm sure we're not going to have any kind of Star Wars situation or any, there's not going to be any kind of war out there, I'm sure, right? The squabbles will have ceased because enlightenment will be so great. I've been thinking a lot about this lately, though, because when I do think about what does Earth look like, a peaceful Earth, I was shooting yesterday, and this new system or this new routine of mine of, selling clothes and then playing basketball and spending time with the family and writing music when I'm spending time with the family. I was like, because for a little bit there, I got too busy to play basketball at the end of last year. I would still play, but not as much as I needed to or would have liked to. Man, now it's been since January, and here we are early March, and it's like I've just been playing consistently, right? And yesterday I was shooting, and I was just feeling. I've been working on my jump shot, and I just go, okay, I'm out there after I worked, and I'm like feeling lightheaded, and my arms are feeling wobbly, and I'm like, okay, wobbly arms, strong legs, I'm like, okay, focus on your footwork on the jump shot. If your arms are feeling tired, and I'm just forever dialing in this jump shot, and I was thinking about as I'm entertaining fainting and losing consciousness on the basketball court, and I'm breathing and I'm going and I'm staying alive, right? I'm fighting it, I'm not giving up. I'm being strong, and I'm putting everything I have, I'm putting everything, my life on the line, in a sense. That's for this jumper. And I don't mean my life on the line as much as I'm oozing all of the hurt, pain, joy, frustration, anxiety, stress, focus. I'm putting it all into this jump shot and the mechanics. And it's crazy because it feels really good to unlock. It feels so good when your muscle memory's on and you're feeling like all the mechanics in your jump shot are it's AI at that point. It's just automatically in. But I was thinking what a blessing it is to have been allowed the time to consistently show up to work on my jumper, because I get to put so many things into it in life, and it ultimately makes me better, and I get a reflection of it through my jumper improving. part of the other thing too, when I'm working out and I'm feeling on the edge physically, I love to, that's mine and God's time. Because you're entertaining your mortality. And for me, that idea in and of itself is something I hold captive to Christ. How and when I'm going to die, all of that stuff, I just give that to the Lord. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm feeling everything going into the jumper. I'm feeling the therapy. But most of all, I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, so many times in my life, I develop good habits, good healthy habits, and then they get taken from me some way or another. I guess in this case, I was thinking how grateful I was, because the threat of having this thing that brings me so much joy being taken from me had not been in the air for a couple months. And I just thought, what a blessing to know that I can work out so much of life through just playing basketball and no one's going to take that away from me. I don't know. I was like, whoa, this is really peaceful. And to be set up in the LA Fitness parking lot and painting clothes while I'm selling clothes, I go, oh my gosh, this is kind of amazing. And like, I've got, like, don't get me wrong, like, I still rather be the songwriter, basketball player kind of, like, but I'm balancing all of the things I'd like to do as a challenge in and of itself, but actually being able to do some of those things and without the threat of it being taken away while it's my livelihood. Unreal. To me, I think about what does peace on earth look like? And I go, man, it looks like I wake up every day and I go, okay, I know that the threat of me not being able, let's just say I know I can write music every day and then I can go and paint clothes when I want to and, I can play basketball. I can sort things. I can spend time with my family without the threat of it being taken away. And as far as, it doesn't matter how far we get out into space. It doesn't matter how many thousands of years ahead we move. The only thing, the only security, the only weapon against the threat in this whole universe is Jesus. Because you can have a planet full of artists that's run by people that think they're good, and you can be under the illusion that you actually are, oh, this is so peaceful, this is great. It's like everyone getting money during the pandemic. Everyone's like, well, yeah, I'm making more now than I was before. And it's like we're just forced to look at this illusion. We're forced to accept this kind of illusion. No, this is good. Let's just let the government give us money. That way I can just sit around and make music all day. Well, here we go, because this is where the meaning of life is to worship God. Not to make music, not to make art for art's sake and music for music's sake. And Elon acts like he's for everybody. All these guys, they act like, well, they're, the vision that people have for our future that don't believe in God. Do you think when they start to see that people who do believe in God don't want to bend a knee and worship technology, how do you think that's going to make them feel? You think they're going to be like, well, no, let's just respect those guys. Like, we're going to have our technology planet over here or civilization over here, and these guys, they can have their own form of it over here. Elon even talked about how if AI really took over, one thing he could see AI doing is just like putting all human life in one part of the planet, keeping us forced into one little area. Which Elon did also say that one thing it was nice to hear him say, but I also wonder from a social engineering standpoint how they're going to spin this, because first they're saying that there's overpopulation. as far as the elite, they have said that there's overpopulation, but now like Japan has sold more adult diapers than baby diapers recently in the recent years, right? Adult diaper sales are up, baby diaper sales are down. That's crazy. So now Elon is talking about population collapse. And I just go, okay, let's just wait and see how can the elite and atheist worldview use the idea of be fruitful and multiply in a way that serves their agenda. And I would imagine that they're going to use some sort of like, okay, because of the idea of population collapse, meaning we don't procreate enough for the species to survive, they're going to have some other way in which women are going to have more babies, or we're going to really be pushing for artificial babies, the technology to just make things, or where they're going to be like collecting eggs and sperm from people. God, the idea of going for like, we're going to grow an egg and sperm in a dish, and then we're going to fertilize the egg with the sperm, and then it's getting out there, that concept, that idea. But right, that's where we're headed. And cloning and all these things, it is a crazy shift as Christians. It's such a hard shift to be like, all right, God. I mean, because I remember in 2005, we cloned the first dog, and it's like hearing my dad preach a sermon about how God already knew that we were going to start cloning things. And this is again from a philosophical standpoint, right? This is that you cannot get out of this. Like God will always, in the biblical worldview, God will always precede creation and have way more knowledge of everything and have more knowledge than us. God will always know what's coming way before he already knows what's coming. It still blows me away. I'd say real head scratcher how much I'm supposed to care about. Oh man, there's like a movie called The Good Son with Macaulay Culkin and some other kid, I forget. And it basically, I'm going to spoil the movie for you guys. It's from the 90s, but I'm pretty sure Macaulay Culkin is the son of this single mother, and she has to adopt like her nephew or something like that. And Macaulay Culkin's character gets jealous and he doesn't like his cousin. And at the end of the movie, they both fall off a cliff, and the mom is holding each of their hands. It's like she's got her son Macaulay Culkin in one hand, and then the other guy, her nephew, in the other hand, and she drops her son because he's such a dick in comparison to the nephew. And it just gets me to think about if someone had to, it was like they cloned their kid, or someone was they got to pick between a clone and a real person. Again, it's the debate is about consciousness, right? It's the same thing with abortion. When does the embryo become conscious enough for it to be considered life? And when does a clone become its own thing enough to be its own life? When does a robot become its own thing enough to be alive? From a biblical worldview, I would imagine if I'm out in space and I'm with like robots and Wookiees and I don't believe there's life on other planets. I believe that there's demonic activity out there. I also believe more in the psyop of aliens than I do that aliens are real, which is way different than what I used to think. I would have said even as recent as, I think it's only been the last 3 years that I haven't believed that aliens were real, that I believe that it's more of a psyop. But before that, I definitely was really believing in aliens. But either way, this idea of me being out in a spaceship in the middle of nowhere with the internet. And that's the other thing, is you don't really see the internet in space movies. At least I haven't. I don't watch a lot of them, but I mean, it's like, you don't really see this, like, you see people like they've got all this great technology, but they're not like hooked up. There's no Neuralink in the future where they're hanging out with droids that have all the information and are the supercomputers. And they rely on them, but they're still separate. What would humans have to do to wipe out the word of God? I mean, that would be as long as the word of God is around and as long as humans are around, there's no, then Christianity will live on forever. I mean, it already is going to live on forever, but I'm just speaking like hypothetically here. I'm just thinking like, what if Jesus doesn't come back for a long time, which I don't necessarily buy either. It's fun to think about. I don't buy it because of the way it describes the return of Jesus and everyone being on earth and the skies parting and everything. I just think we'll be here on earth. That's what it seems like. But I do love to think about humans being in, traveling space and still having the word of God. I just think there's something like, ooh, I wonder what that looks like. I just think it's fun to think about. Okay, so then he says, think of the big picture. So yeah, so he's talking about squabbling still, right? He's saying that people get trapped by the squabbles. He's like, think of the big picture. They take our existence for granted. Civilization is globalized. And so for civilization, I think now we rise and fall together. There's no geographic isolation. I mean, there was a point in time where, people in another country could get wiped off the planet and we would never have known. And now we are so connected that, it's like now because of how connected we are on the earth, it's almost like what would have been like the open sea back in the day. We were like, whoa, who is that person over there? And they're like, oh, dang, they need help. And we would have been like, we would have had to have been curious enough to go see who they were. Were they our people? Were they not our people, but had something that we needed? Would we want to help them? Would we, it's like there's just, so we would have been like, boom, let's go save those people over there. Let's go look more into it. And now the whole world is like that. So if one country even starts like, I don't know, natural disaster or whatever, people are quote unquote drowning. It's like we already do that. We're already rushing to rescue people, which we should be. So yeah, there is this connectivity now that kind of, it feels like the whole globe is in this together. I love that when he thinks the big picture and the future, I love how much peace is there. And I wonder where he gets his peace from. I mean, I know he gets his inspiration and everything from the expansiveness, like he said, like of the universe. I don't know if I've said this already, but the interviewer asked him, what's he in awe of? And he just said, he's in awe of how big and expansive the universe is. And it's crazy to think about how big and expansive the universe is and that there's a God that created it and that he loves you. That is insane. But there being no God is equally as insane. How complex are we? And we just evolved this way? The simplicity just stacked and stacked and stacked and stacked and stacked. You don't even see music work that way. Like, sure, music evolves and everything, but and it can kind of get more complex, but at some point, it like we've just reached now, at some point, it's like music just seems like music. It doesn't seem like there's like this crazy complex music, even though there is. There's still just 7 notes doing what 7 notes do. He also said he thinks about, as far as like him saying in 500 million years, the sun will expand and evaporate the ocean and Earth will no longer be livable. And then he says he thinks, and obviously for him, it's a race against the clock here on Earth. And he was saying, I wonder how many dead planets are in the cosmos that didn't make it off in time. Which again, I mean, I love sci-fi. I can totally resonate with the adventurer spirit, right? Because that's what gets him out of bed in the morning, right? He even says that we all need things to get out of bed for. And for him, it's his hope in the advancement of the human civilization. It's his hope in technology and the future that gets him excited and out of bed. And for me, it's what gets me out of the bed is the hope in Christ that I have, in the peace that I feel, in that I get to worship God in everything that I do. And that the thing that gives me hope is that I am in touch. Us people do understand that we should be living up to a moral standard that we're not. And so therefore we are doing our best to do so. But there is also a God that wants to strengthen us and empower us to do so. He is the very thing that we run off of. We are powered off of him. We're not powered off of the God of adventure and the God of enlightenment and the God of space. So then he talks about, us being a single cell life, a multi-cell life. He's just talking about evolution here. So first we were single cell, then multi-cell, then the differentiation between plants and animals, then life going from ocean to land and mammals and consciousness. And then he says life becoming multiplanetary. And he views that as preserving consciousness. And he basically says that becoming multiplanetary is life insurance. Then he says, the part I find personally most motivating is that it creates a sense of adventure and it makes people excited about the future. If you can consider two futures, one where we are forever confined to Earth until eventually something terrible happens, or another future where we are out there on so many planets, maybe even going beyond the solar system. The second version is incredibly exciting and inspiring, and there need to be reasons to get up in the morning. Life can't just be about solving problems. Otherwise, what's the point? There's got to be things that people find inspiring and make life worth living. There's got to be things that life can't be just about solving problems. Otherwise, what's the point? Okay, so the meaning of life is not to solve problems. That's what he just said. Otherwise, what's the point? It can't just be about solving problems. But it's got to be about asking the right questions, which we do to solve problems. Also, this idea, let's back up a little bit, where he says a future where we're confined to Earth, just like we're confined to our bodies too, as far as spiritual practice. The body is a curse. Being confined to the earth is a curse. Yet we can't even get our relationship to each other right, or our relationship to the planet right. Yet we're confined here. And I get it. He's by the time we get to the point where we are going to get off planet Earth, in his mind, we will have probably taken better care of planet Earth too, with the technology. But again, the part that I personally find motivating is that it creates a sense of adventure and it makes people excited about the future. If you consider two futures, one where we're forever confined to Earth until eventually something terrible happens, or another future where we are out there on so many planets, maybe even going beyond the solar system. The second version is incredibly exciting and inspiring. And there needs to be reasons to get up in the morning. Life can't just be about solving problems. But the whole reason to getting up in the morning is the inspiration to go out there and solve all these problems. I just don't get it. I don't get what I don't get how he doesn't get how he's contradicting himself. There's got to be things that people find inspiring and make life worth living. And then he says, I believe in God. I believe in the God of Espinosa. And the God of Espinosa is who reveals himself in the lawful harmony of the world, not in God who concerns himself with the fate and doings of mankind, right? And that's Einstein. That's his quote on believing in the God of Espinosa. All right, so like Einstein, Elon Musk believes in creation more than the creator. But then he also said, if Jesus is saving people, I wouldn't stand in his way. Well, we'll see I could even see Elon maybe meaning that, but that doesn't mean that by the time we live in the future that Elon is talking about, that it won't be a world in which people want to stand in the way of Jesus saving lives. Then the guy asks him, what is life? And Elon says, confusing, troubling, uncertain. And then he gives the example of video games. We're moving pretty quickly at the advancement in video games. But even if you cut that down 1,000% and we're just at 0.1% and you extrapolate that out down the road, eventually games are going to become indistinguishable from reality as we know it. And I feel like I missed something that it kind of ties into here. Oh yeah, okay. He was at one point, someone was asking him if it was a simulation, and he was he was saying that it's like 1 in 1 billion% chance that this is base reality. And the guy was like, so so are you saying this is a simulation? He's like, no, I'm saying this is 1 in 0.1 billion% base reality. But he says, if this is a simulation, if this was a simulation, you could just make things be however you want, and the laws don't all have to be consistent. He's basically saying that in a simulation, it could be an open system to the point where miracles could happen, right? On the other hand, he's saying we would be lucky if this is a simulation, because then we could just make things be however you want, and the laws don't have to be consistent, which is just wild to me. And it's the same thing. It's like the miracle of, someone's finger growing back. God opening up this system, the universe, it's an open system. God can create miracles at, whenever he wants to. Science being able to grow a finger back is amazing. Someone's finger growing back without science is even more amazing. On its own, the cause of the fluttery feeling I feel when the Holy Spirit is close to me versus the fluttering feeling I feel on Molly, even if I am inviting God to be there with me on the Molly, 2 different things. Not the same thing. One, the cause, they might have similar effects, seemingly similar effects in the short term, but one, the cause is completely different. And therefore, the long-term studies will show that the effect is going to be different. But all this simulation talk is hilarious to me. So anyways, but then he's sure, yes, we're going to live in a reality where video games and virtual reality are indistinguishable from reality. In another video, he's talking about, being a teenager and asking what the meaning of life is. And he said it seemed like there was no good answers. So it seemed like, well, in the absence of having a good answer, then we should try to expand the scope and the scale of human consciousness in order to better appreciate the nature of the problem that we are trying to solve and figure out what questions to ask. It is wild to think every atheist and transhumanist is waiting to defeat this glitch called death in the that's in the system. And Christ has already defeated it and already shown us that it's possible and already promised us that he's going to do the same thing for us if we just believe in him. I love how much meaning the Bible proposes and how willing we are to look all these other directions for it. It's funny because in the Adam and Eve, right, we could have looked everywhere except for one direction, and we went and looked in that one direction. We could have looked anywhere in the Garden of Eden and had meaning and had truth in God except for the one direction. And then we look and we participated in looking in that direction, right? Now we can only look one direction to find God and truth, and that's Christ. And we can't look anywhere else. I just love that, there was no good answer. So it seemed like, well, in the absence of having a good answer, then we should try to expand the scope of scale of human consciousness in order to better appreciate the nature of the problem that we are trying to solve and figure out the question, what questions to ask. I love it because it's like, at some point you're like bodybuilding and you're like, all right, I'm going from 550 to 575. And like, nobody cares, bro. Really? No, nobody really cares. You could have stayed at 500 and we all would have been just as impressed as 575. Because the meaning of life is not to bench press who bench presses the most. So it's like Elon's asking these really seemingly super smart questions. Like, that's a brilliant, if I were him, I hope I would have thought of something like that. Okay, there's no seemingly good answers. Okay, so then what should we do? Well, shoot, maybe we don't know. We got to expand the scope and scale. How are we looking and measuring everything? It's consciousness. That's the issue. If we were only more conscious, we could appreciate and then we could solve. We could appreciate the nature of the problem that we're trying to solve. Man, well, dying to your flesh, I've never seen a more appreciative or a more sacrificial way of having to solve a problem. And to him, all of these, the question is, how do we expand? What we're trying to solve also is expanding life, the lifespan, and expanding beyond Earth. And all of these things that he's putting meaning in, like, expanding our lifespan and the expansion beyond Earth, begs the question. And thus, us and them, the atheist and the Christian, are in the same place. We're begging the question. Only it's one step back, right? For the atheist, it's why should we expand the lifespan and expand beyond Earth? What makes any of that meaningful? And then for the Christian, it's who made God? That's what the question. That's the question that we're begging in their mind, right? Is, well, then who made God? But then we say, well, God is outside of time, space, and matter. He's the uncreated creator. Well, that can't be possible. Why can't that be possible? Multiverse theory, time travel, aliens, evolution, all of this stuff is possible, but no, there's no uncreated creator. Even though everything we see here on Earth is created by something. We don't ever see life come from non-life here. So yeah, he basically says I already said that. Okay, so he said the advancement of video games decreased 1,000%. We would still reach virtuality being indistinguishable from reality, say in 10,000 years. 10,000 years is nothing in the scale of evolution. It's true. And that's why I don't mind thinking about Christians in space, because 10,000 years is not a long time. And then, then he says, maybe we should be hopeful this is a simulation, because we were either going to create a simulation, either we're going to create a simulation that's indistinguishable from reality, or civilization will cease to exist. Those are the two options. To me, I was like, that sounds like a self-fulfilling prophecy. See, and that's, how is going out into space a simulation? I think he's saying that there's either we learn how to become multiplanetary, and we live out, and we just go populate and spread consciousness throughout the universe, right? And in that case, we could still just be in this planet. Like, we don't have to be in a simulation at that point. So maybe there's like once we get into space and conquer space, then what? Like, where does the being multiplanetary and then creating a virtual simulation that we live in, how do those line up? Those both seem like their own thing. Or does the simulation come after we already are out there in space for a while? Are we trying to do too much? Let's throw DMT in there too, right? How is creating a simulation that's indistinguishable? So I think he's just meaning consciously then. If we really are isolating what's conscious, what consciousness is, and then we can just put that in anything, that doesn't make any sense to me. Because what? Now we're in a virtual server, and where is the virtual server? What, all of our consciousness? What are we just like? There's just satellites throughout the whole universe, and literally we just live in this like virtual reality space that is powered by a server and satellites, and it's all just like. There's so then what happens to the server when it gets hit by something? I love how much time someone like Elon Musk spends just in that fantasy, right? In this timeline of this being what's going to happen. And every time a lot of these questions come up, sure, you can entertain some of them, but a lot of them you just kind of brush off. I don't blame him. Everyone does it, but it's with their worldview a little bit. But again, even with Neuralink and stuff, and the hackability of everything and the hackability of AI, yet we still want to go this direction because we've got nothing better to do, because everyone wants to look every other direction than besides on Christ. There are many simulations running a substrate that's probably boring. Yeah, running on a substrate, that's probably boring. So he's basically saying that, like, he's making this comparison that the simulation is better than the reality. And he's saying, like, and I love how much he's using concepts of creation, right? Things that already exist. So spending time thinking about, and I don't blame him, but spending time thinking about a God that was creating in his mind before anything ever existed, there's zero rationality coming through that filter or through that lens. And so, yeah, he's basically saying, like, if you watch an action movie being made, it's super boring. There's just green screens and there's no music, and it is really boring. But then you add the special effects, right? And then it becomes what it is. So we need these special effects, these virtual special effects. It will probably be the thing again, many simulations running a substrate that's probably pretty boring. And it is. It's like a lot of the coding. The coding might not be the exciting thing, but the game is the super exciting thing. The coding might seem boring in comparison, and hopefully it does. So he's saying if we're likely in a simulation, it's more likely that it's really boring outside the simulation. Why would we make a simulation that's boring? I love how, and the dual, like it's adventure versus boring here in, on the spiritual battlegrounds of Elon Musk. We should rid all boringness from people. You can make a simulation way more interesting than a base reality. How do we determine what is interesting? That seems like almost a value thing. If you value if you have a certain set of values over here, then you will find these things more interesting. And if you have another set of values over here, you'll find these things interesting. So you can make a simulation way more interesting than base reality, but will it be just as valuable? And then he says, what defines where you are? I love this. Okay, what defines where you are? Why do you think you're where you are right now? You might not be. You think you know why you think what you think, like Jordan Peterson says. And then from I Heart Huckabees, how am I not myself? How am I not myself? How am I not myself? Again, what is the self? What is consciousness? What is reality? You start to see again, it's not just this like worshiping of God and surrendering and our autonomy over to God. There's stuff that goes on way deeper when you look at Christ and the biblical worldview as a valid worldview. What defines where you are? Well, I guess what defines the meaning of what you mean when you say, where are you? I can be sitting here, but mentally I can be somewhere else. That's his point, right? But I can be sitting here physically and still be somewhere else. And that's also his point. So does that just mean that there's literally like I could be sitting here with VR and be somewhere else, or I can just be sitting here and be in my head up in my problems and be not here? So what do you mean what defines where you are? I would say there's a level of presence that defines where you are. And then I would also say there's a level of just physical matter defining where you are. And this is the mystery, right? How can you be potentially at two places at once? Why do you think you're where you are right now? You might not be. Yeah, sure. I'm going to wake up and this is going to feel like the most real dream. 30 I was there for, man, I lived another life for 38 years. I'm going to wake up in like a little like vat of oil, or I don't know, like some like liquid gel that's like connected to all these things. Somehow I'm connected to wires, and it's just like I'm in this freaking gel soup that's got me plugged into this simulation where we created this Jesus in this simulation. I just love how open these people are to certain things, and then how closed off we are to another. Because I'm not even closed off to anything that he's talking about. Like I said, I used to believe in aliens. I don't mind taking Molly and feeling great and trying to work. Like there were parts of that stuff I was doing on my own that was somewhat fulfilling in a way. So it's not like I'm just like, I've never experienced it. I can't, see some of the good, or I haven't experienced some of the good in that way of thinking. There's just an infinite amount more peace when you meet Jesus and when you realize that he's the truth. And when you realize that simulation, that's now we're talking about the devil. We are already living in a simulation, on a spiritual simulation, where it's seemingly like things like we see the world living. Satan came down, got us to fall. Then all of a sudden, Satan's curse was all over the world, and his simulation, began, right? God started this planet. He's created it from the zero, went all the way up. And then Satan came. He said, I'm going to do the same thing, God, but I'm actually going to start at the one, and I'm going to go all the way up. Basically, he's saying, like, either we get a super intelligence or civilization is going to end. Yeah, we already know that. We agree with you. We just know what the super intelligence is, and we know that we're not going to create it. So then he's talking about there's so much stuff falling from space all the time. He's just talking about how much how much room is on planet Earth. And he's talking about you could literally drive a plane around and you could drop cannonballs out of the plane and you wouldn't even hit anybody. The chances of you hitting someone are so unlikely, and things fall from the sky all the time. And we're okay. We don't things from planes to plane parts to things coming from space, right? And he also says that there's this guy, he has a website called waitbutwhy.com, and this guy Tim Urban did the math, and you don't even need upper floors for this, but he says all humans on Earth can fit in the city of New York. And then as far as like a pyramid structure, at the bottom of the pyramid, you have young babies being born, and at the top, you've got older people dying. He says there's a lot of countries right now where it's an upside down pyramid and you have more adults than you do babies. You have more people on their way out than you do on their way in. And Europe and China is heading that way too. And it's also this idea, this norm that we're supposed to just have one kid. It's like that's the new norm. Ooh, I just hate to hear it, but just people saying the best thing we can do for the environment is not have a kid. It's like, that seems like the same thing when Elon Musk goes, I read all the philosophy books and all the spiritual books, and you know what? No other human got a good reason for the meaning of life. So that must mean that I'm pretty freaking smart and that I got to open the scale and scope for our humanity so we could figure this out. And meanwhile, people are like, well, I did read that overpopulation is a thing, and I don't know if I want to bring a kid into this world. I mean, look at where it's going. No, I haven't given up hope yet. I just don't want the hassle of partaking. And I mean, it's like, I don't know. I just think it's crazy that, I mean, like, really, if you were hopeful, you would have kids and you would believe in this process. Surely we can agree that we need to be fruitful and multiply. I am just tired of watching awesome people choose to look at this potential fear around having kids and responsibility around having kids, and choosing to take the easy way out. There's just not enough people out there being like, no, take the hard road and learn to love the hard road, appreciate the hard road. I can't, I'm just so stressed and anxious and I don't have any money. Well, yeah, because you're being too soft on yourself. Like, we should be able to find a better balance than any other generation or civilization before us. But also the temptation to just choose convenient and comfort over any conviction is even more prevalent now than ever. So make those babies, y'all, because they are the future. And if you believe in hope for humanity, then make some freaking babies and raise some warriors, raise some lovers, raise some badass children. So badass that it's worth the risk and the investment. I'm going to contribute to society, but not taxing the environment as much. That's what I'm doing my part. We wanted a kid, but then we just realized that, we just don't know. I mean, what's going to happen in the next 10 years? There could be a war. That's true. Yeah, let's all do that. Let's just do that, huh? This is what happens when you don't get rid of when you get rid of survival of the fittest, when you just want it to be this freaking ribbon ceremony. You get a ribbon, you get a ribbon, you get a ribbon. So, we're rapidly heading towards superintelligence that far exceeds humans. Okay. And this is what he says: AI does not have to be evil to destroy humanity. If AI has a goal and humanity just happens to be in the way, it will destroy humanity as a matter of course, like with humans and ants. And he basically says how we, have no regard for anthills when we build roads, and we don't feel bad about it at all. And he's true. All this I can see is being true. There's a little clip where he was talking to Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan's like, well, AI outside of human control is not necessarily bad, right? AI outside of human control? Are you kidding me, guys? I just love it because the Bible talks about this. Like, Israel was not supposed to have a king. There was not supposed to be someone directly in control, a human in control of Israel. God was just supposed to be who they worshiped, and was supposed to be their king. They were supposed to almost, with God's help, self-regulate. But we couldn't take it. We were like, God, give us a king. Syria has a king. All these different places have kings. God's like, all right, I'll give you a king. And then what do we get? Fallible kings. Even if they're good. Now we want to give up. Humans want to be like, God, we don't know what we're doing. Can we create an artificial robot system that tells us how to live right? I know I've learned, man. I mean, like, it's another reason for me, another reason for me against why I don't think orthodoxy is right, or is the only right one. I think it's right. Don't get me wrong. I think they got a lot. I think they have tons of right theology, but I think that God is bigger than just the scope that they have on theology, their scope of theology. They're like, we have the one church, which, again, don't get me wrong. I wish it was that simple. I wish that there was just the one church. But I haven't found it to be that simple. Actually, I've just found it. Yeah, I haven't found it to be that simple. But to me, it could be another example of just wanting there to be, like, we just need one king God. We just need the one Orthodox church. Then we know who has the power. It's like, no, there's so many ways to partake in God's grace. Church is one way, prayer is another, worship, reading your Bible, and God's going to use them all to speak to us. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely, we use all of these things as a check. The revelation stuff we have, let's say in our prayer life, we bounce it off of scripture, and we there's a checks and balances. But God, again, he's definitely not saying submit to the Pope. It's like, God didn't want us to have a king, guys. God wanted all of us to not bow to anyone or anything but him. He came to level the playing field for everyone, rich and poor, sick and health, wise men or not, king or shepherd. Yeah, so again, just this notion that we want to, we can surrender to AI to keep us in line, right? AI outside of human control. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but what the frick are you talking about? Not necessarily a bad thing? Like, I'd lean more towards it being a bad thing than a good thing. I love that there's like, yeah, but these Joe Rogan and Elon Musk, they have so much faith in technology that they're just like, in humans, they're just like, yeah, but it's not necessarily bad, right? Well, let's pray not. Then he brings up like the dangers of AI, like using AI as a weapon, and using, humans using AI against each other, and basically saying intelligence will keep advancing, and the only thing that could stop it is civilization turning it into stasis, or AI destroying a civilization. There is so much room for other things to happen within a biblical worldview. Here, we're really just getting And what I mean by there's so much more room for things to happen with the biblical worldview, meaning like we're not just stuck to either a super intelligence or collapse of civilization. And still, what is it all for? Let's see here. I'm almost done. Okay, yeah, so this is what Elon is saying. We have to figure out what is a world we'd like to be in where there is a digital superintelligence. And I love how he said that we'd like to be in, because he definitely means like we could be in a virtual world. Our consciousness could be out of our bodies and in some other thing. And so, yeah, we have to figure out the kind of world we would like to be in where there is a digital superintelligence. Well, probably the same kind of world we'd want to live in without one. Like what? All of us are already cyborgs, so you have a machine extension of yourself in the form of a phone and your computer and all your apps. You are already a superhuman by far. We have this oracle of wisdom, I call her great grandma Goo Goo, and you can ask her anything. As though us being cyborgs had helped us be any more human. I love how we need the technology to make us better humans, but then the technology fails to make us better humans. Like there's even kind of like what C.S. Lewis was saying about a dog can be somewhat good, somewhat bad. And then a kid can be somewhat good, somewhat bad. An adult can be even more so good and even more so bad. And a genius can be even more so good and a more so bad. And a person with a cyborg, it's like even a cyborg can be, the more sophisticated you are, the more sophisticatedly evil you can be or sophisticatedly good you can be. To me, what consciousness feels like, it feels like consciousness is in a different dimension, but this is just an illusion. I can agree with that. I can agree with I think that could be true. I still think the way in which everything overlaps and comes together, that harmony that he's talking about, I still think that, I think the way it all overlaps together, we're going to find out that there's missing pieces and that God is in charge of those missing pieces. How long does God give us? Because really, this goes on. God is infinitely ahead of us, and it will take us infinity to figure out, we'll never get up to him. We'll never catch up to him. But yet we think that that's the point. We think there's no need for God because if it's the God of time that will actually is on our side. So just give us more time, God. Then we'll figure out everything that, we didn't know. Okay, AI will be able to simulate consciousness to the degree you won't be able to tell the difference. And he's like, and if you can't tell, you might as well. And I just go, man, the level of the lack of discernment that a lot of these people have blows me away. As though they think there's going to be a way in which humans are going to be inseparable from AI conscious, from this kind of, you're going to be talking to someone and you're not even going to be able to know if it's AI or not. People are too much an expression of where they came from and where they've been. So I just don't get how you're not going to be able to tell. I think you can't tell, Elon, the ways in which we will be able to tell yet. I think humans will always find a way, basically to find discernment. Then he says AI is worse than a nuclear weapon. We will be basically house cats to AI, right? A huge server bank in the dark vault somewhere with an intelligence that potentially vastly greater than what a human mind can do. Its eyes and ears would be on every camera and microphone and device accessible. And robots would be the finger of AI. And they would influence the direction of society, influence elections within a milliseconds of feedback. It hones its message and shifts and reacts to news. Yeah, second by second reporting. Imagine you're watching a teacher grading your test, and it's like you start off with a freaking F because you get the first 3 questions wrong, and it's like you're still at an F. But then by the time you're done, you're back at an A. But somehow we will be able to manipulate the flow of consciousness, the way people think, just like we do now with the news and everything, only this will be even more of a split second decision on what's the best way to program us based off the information given. And if you don't, we're going to send our enforcer robots around to make sure you do. I just think it's wild that people have such a problem with this. All like Elon's like, I don't know about a super consciousness that basically, let's go back. Yeah, this idea of a super consciousness watching over our every movement and kind of evaluating it against some criteria. Well, that definitely will be AI. So the first half of this statement, he's like, I don't know about that. God, watching over every moment and kind of evaluating the way we act against his own criteria in deciding whether we're going to one place or another when we die. What do you think going to determine where we go and when we go places if AI is in charge? Do you think it's just everyone, all of a sudden we've got this great system, therefore there's no policing, there's no one's doing anything wrong, no one's doing anything dangerous, no one's doing anything that's going to endanger other people? Or do you think in this future that there's going to be this super consciousness that's going to evaluate the way we act against its own criteria, and then it's going to determine where we end up? Yeah. Sounds like what's going to happen. I don't know how you see it working any other way. We're just trying to come up with, we're going to come up with we've already come up with the God of science, but we're trying to build a statue for it right now. And it's going to be the most sophisticated statue because it's going to be able to communicate with, it's going to be a thinking statue. Yeah, so he's saying AI is an exponential threat, a linear response to an exponential threat. Quite likely the exponential threat will win. Chances of, yeah. So, yeah, the more we rely on technology, the more it's going to be, there's this exponential threat of it just being able to take over us. So we have to become one with it. That way it doesn't take us over. I don't get how you guys don't see how this is spiritual. Basically, there's a solution, right? Because what's gonna make us so that we're not just going against AI, and that we have this potential threat, right? And it's because we only have this linear approach to dealing with this exponential threat. Well, we become one with the exponential threat, right? So now it's no longer linear. We are one with it. Again, we're in this figure eight, and it's just infinitely looping. And so he's saying the solution here could be basically you have your limbic system, your cortex, and then you'll have a digital layer above the cortex that works symbiotically with you. And Neuralink is, he hopes to achieve symbiosis with the AI and to be able to democratize it so it's not monopolistically held, in a purely digital form by governments or large corporations. But it's like Neuralink itself is a large corporation. I just don't get where do we think the responsibility is going to lie? It's the same thing with the mystery between God and humans. What is the sovereignty of God and then the responsibility of man when it comes to salvation? Is it more on the sovereignty of God? Is it more on the responsibility of man? Is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? It's the same thing here with AI. Who's going to be responsible for the AI? Are we just going to say instead of a natural disaster, it's just an AI disaster now? Oh, it's just an AI disaster. AI is sovereign. Whatever AI wants, we had no other option. No, we built AI, dummies. We didn't build earthquakes and tsunamis. We might one day figure out how to trigger them. But, again, what the sovereignty of AI versus the responsibility of man. And again, you just see how these themes, this is nothing new. And if you look at the Bible, you will see that this has been going on since the test of time. So that's all I got for today. If you are an atheist, I would love to hear what you have to say. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. So hit me up. And that's about it. All right. Thanks for being here. I love you. Bye.